Hi, this is Jay McClellan, and today is my wife's birthday. For her birthday, since she loves dragons and loves to garden, I made her a dragon sculpture to go out in the garden. And in this video, I'll show you how I made it. This will be a very simple project to build, so if you want to build something like this, all you need is a piece of steel about 1/8 of an inch or 3 millimeters thick. You need a pattern, which you can get for free, and I'll put a link to that out on my website. You need a way to cut some shapes out of the steel, and you need a way to weld them together. And that's about it. So I really like doing garden metalwork sculptures because the welding is so non-critical. You can just put it together, and if they're a little rough, they come out looking just fine. They're going to sit outside and rust anyway, and so it's a lot of fun to weld up stuff like this. The pattern for this project came from a posting I found on Instructables.com for a 6-foot tall Tyrannosaurus Rex made out of plywood. And I'll put a link to that project out on my website so you can go get the original pattern. I'm going to build basically the same thing and then add a pair of wings to turn it into a dragon. This is not so big. I scaled it down to 30% size, which made it so that the pattern pieces would print on an 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper, which is what my printer uses. So I printed out the pattern pieces on heavy cardstock. The pattern has a few pieces, such as this one, that are made where you're expected to make 2 for right and left, and I printed out duplicates of those so that I have one of every piece that I need. I like the plasma cutter because the rough plasma cut edges I think look really good with this kind of model. They give it kind of a earthy, fiery sort of appearance. If you don't have a plasma cutter, another option for cutting out shapes like this is just an inexpensive jigsaw with a metal cutting blade. When you're done, this panel actually is kind of cool looking just by itself. So if you can arrange things with a little spacing and lay them out so that the remainder is attractive, you actually have zero waste. I didn't design the wings yet. I'm going to build the entire Tyrannosaurus Rex model first, and then I'll design the wings so that I can see how they look with it before I cut them out of steel. When I traced out the 2 head pieces with the teeth, I didn't bother tracing the individual teeth. I'll just freehand those with the plasma cutter. I also left a little bit of room up here for some horns, and I'll just freehand those in. We'll see how they look. If I don't like them, I can always cut them off or maybe weld on bigger ones. Now that I have all the parts traced out on the steel, I'm going to cut them out with a plasma cutter, and I'll start off by just slicing off this excess piece. I also sprayed the surroundings with water, so I won't be starting any fires this time. Now that I have the piece trimmed to size, it's time to start cutting out the individual pieces. Cutting pretty well, and I've been using it with this little tip guide to help with the spacing of the plasma torch, and I think it actually works better without it. It's easier to move smoothly, so that's how I'll use it from now on. Well, I've got all the pieces cut out except for the 2 sides of the skull, and I saved these for last because I've had a lot of practice now cutting the others out, so I'm getting a little bit better at cutting it smoothly. And on these 2 pieces, I'm going to have to just improvise the teeth as I go, so I'll draw in some teeth as I'm cutting. So I have all the pieces cut out except for the wings that I'll do later, and that's what's left. Well, the sides of the skull came out okay, but I think the horns look rather pathetic, so I'm going to cut them off, and I'll either leave them off entirely or I'll weld on some bigger ones later. Before I assemble the model, I've got some trimming to do because all of these slots in the pieces need to be wide enough for another piece of steel to fit all the way to the bottom. Well, everything's cut out, and I have a nice assortment of Tyrannosaurus Rex parts. I numbered every single part mainly so I can call them out as I put them together, but you really don't have to put numbers on the ones that are quite uniquely shaped. You'll be able to fit them together. The main ones you need to number are the ones where you've got a big stack of very similar looking parts because you want to get them in the right order. In the plans you'll see there's an assembly drawing, and I'm going to start by assembling the tail section and the pelvis and the legs. But before I do any of that, I'm going to go ahead and fit all of these little vertebra pieces and the rib pieces like this. Just test fit them all the way down and make sure they're good to go, because I don't want to have to do plasma cutting on parts that I've already welded together. These all look like they fit pretty well. Some of them are sitting a little crooked, but there's enough slop in them that I can align them as I weld them. The fit up of this is quite loose. Don't worry about it. We'll fix that with the welder. That's a nice thing about garden art. You really don't need a high precision fit up. As long as we can get them welded together and they'll stay, it's going to work out just fine. Well, here's my rack of ribs, and I think they look pretty good too. Well, I've got all my parts cut. I've got them test fitted, and all of the notches are wide enough, so now it's time to put it together. So this is piece number 9. If you hold it in this orientation and then take the 2 number 3 pieces, slide them on like that, the notch goes down. If they fit kinda and they're a little rough, often it's just the dross from plasma cutting, if that's how you cut it out, and often you can kind of scrape that off or just force it in, so it may not need any additional trimming. Then we take piece number 8 in this orientation with the 3 notches on the top. If you can get that assembly working, then the rest is pretty straightforward, but it took me a while to figure out exactly which piece went where. Then you can take the legs, like that. So 1 is the right leg, 2 is the left leg. You could actually switch those around if you want. It's set so the legs are different, so it's kind of taking a step forward. Piece number 7 on the back. There we go. Once you get the legs and the tail assembled to the pelvis, it's kind of self-supporting. Well, I've got everything posed the way I want it, and it's quite a handful trying to manage all of these with nothing actually hooked together, and I find these little welding magnets to be pretty handy at getting things together. So I've got a couple up in here that you can't see very well, holding the pelvis pieces together, and then one's blocking the legs and the tail. The fit up is really loose, and so to weld really loose joints like this with a flux cord wire welder, basically as you go in, just look for the points where things are touching, and once you get them tacked in the places where they're touching, then things get more rigid and you can fill in the larger gaps. You don't have to weld every inch of every seam. This is a garden sculpture. It's not going to be a space shuttle. Well, I got the center section welded up, so it's pretty sturdy, and the last pieces to add to this section are these number 4 pieces, and they slide up from the bottom like this. They don't really support anything else, they just kind of sit there. Now it's time to add the front half of the spine, and it really starts to look like something now. Try to get things aligned as well as I can, and that looks like it's lined up pretty well. So I'm going to go ahead and weld that firmly in place. There we are. That's nice and sturdy. This looks kind of like an eye, but it's actually not. Next we'll do the head assembly. This part's a lot simpler to put together because there are really only 3 pieces that go on. Part number 25 slides on like that. and then the two sides of the head, number 6, slide into the gaps on the sides. As long as things look pretty well lined up, it's ready to weld. All that's left is to put on this stack of pieces along the lower tail and then the rib cage. I got them all set in place and ready to weld. Some of them sit a little crooked just on their own, but I made sure that I can twist them and straighten them up enough so they'll look straight when I weld them. So I'll just hold each one in place as I weld it. These are parts 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, and 18. There we go. Well, I've got each one just tacked in place lightly, as is my usual practice. So now I've held them as straight as I can, but now I can go tweak them a little bit. It actually looks pretty good. They're all pretty close to straight. Last section is the rib cage. These are parts 19 through 24. The arms are piece number 5, and they just hook on to one of the ribs. And I like to kind of bend them out a little bit. Well, that's not a bad looking T-Rex, and certainly we could stop right there. If all you want is a T-Rex, it's not a bad sculpture at all. But I want to make wings. I want to turn it into a dragon. So that'll be my next task, is to design some wings for it, cut them out of metal, and weld them on. Well, I designed a pair of wings, and I made them not too terribly big because I don't want to throw the model off physically. And I tried to keep with the sort of simplified aesthetic of the model, so they're sort of a simplified skeleton of a wing, and also tried to copy some of the curvature of the leg segments so it'll look consistent. And this fits within the steel that I have left, so I'll be able to reuse the remaining piece of steel. I also have enough room for some horns, so I designed some little bit bigger horns to go on the head. So I'll trace these onto my piece of steel and cut them out. I have the wings supported on some little welding magnets. Very simple fixture. Well, my weld burned through right at the end, but as it happens, I actually need a notch right there to fit over the spine, so that's going to work out just fine. Here we are, time for final assembly. And for the finishing touch, some respectable horns. Too bad I couldn't get them to stay glowing like that. Well, my wife likes her birthday present, and I had fun making it, so I hope you enjoyed the video, and thanks for watching.